Welcome to Fortune Forecast. I am Daisy, your hostess, and in this video we continue on with the book titled The Invisible Influence by Dr. Alexander Cannon. This book is in the public domain. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and to our subscribers, welcome back. Thank you for being a part of this community. And here we have another book in the channel that is published by a psychiatrist, a doctor, talking about what is known as the paranormal. And yet, these are just extended senses that we have yet to develop, or many of us have yet to develop, and science is still trying to understand. We have come a long way in the area of psychiatry and metaphysical science. One of those things, let's say, is the ability to demonstrate that there is an energy field coming out of the body by the use of the Kirlian photography, which this is known as the aura. And there are so many other discoveries and breakthroughs that are coming through. I myself am not a scientist, but there are some things that I personally do not need to have the total explanation, like one of those apostles, what was it, Doubting Tom, who wanted to see the wound in Jesus. I don't need that, but some people do. I have these personal experience myself, so I don't need to have the full explanation, but I am fascinated when I see these scientific journals that do offer a very valid explanation to what we consider paranormal. And the truth is, it's just super normal. In the book of John, Jesus was quoted as saying that those who have faith, if they believe, they will do greater things than he did. And all this for the betterment of the human race. So let's move on now to this next chapter, which I am intrigued with the title, A Terrible Truth. We had, on the evening of the visit to our castle of the Governor General, burnt the candle far into the night, and had profited much by our discussion, as we were all adepts of the great cult. It was not for some days that we had a further opportunity of chatting over the things which were nearest and dearest to our hearts. The sun shone brightly this morning, which was the Sabbath, for in the East we keep the sacred day just as we honor the Sunday at home. This morning we were looking forward to a last visit from the Governor General, ere we traveled further into the unknown land of the Far East, on our quest in search of the greatest secret of all, the power to bring back the body from the grave and once more instill life into it. As the Nazarene Christ named Jesus did in the days of long ago, when he said that if we had faith, we could not only do the things which he did, but greater things. His own words were, "Greater things than these shall ye do, for I go unto my Father." It was by the careful adjustment of the vibrations of his body to the vibrations emanating from the fig tree that he was able to command and be obeyed. When he commanded the tree to wither, immediately it withered away. The Governor General arrived in all his pomp, and having partaken of light refreshment, we resumed our conversation. His Excellency said that seeing it was the Sabbath, we should talk along the more sacred lines of our cult. So he commenced. You will have long since realized that the doctrine of Christianity, shown by the teaching of the New Testament, is in close, exact accord and harmony with what hypnotism and telepathy have proved by the duality of mind. It is therefore understood how the acceptance of the suggestion of the sacrifice of Christ by the unconscious mind recreates, as it were, the birth of the belief in the soul. For logically, we have now proved without a shadow of a doubt that the acknowledgement only of the doctrine of Christianity as a supreme belief may only affect the physical consciousness, and as we have already proved, can die out or be destroyed. Therefore, the one that only seemeth to have is a very different one from the one who hath. Ponder over this great thought in your mind. It is a great fact. The real active acceptance of a truth, when accepted right home to the unconscious mind, persists through eternity. Proof of the hereafter. Therefore, a terrible truth is manifested when one really scientifically understands what acceptance of suggestion really means. Because the soul must exist in this state of belief after death, exactly in accordance with what it has really made its own in the normal state of consciousness in its everyday life in this world we live in. Therefore, this kingdom of heaven within us, this unconscious self which survives our fleeting conscious self, is in our own hands, to be made in accordance with the mind of God or the mind of the devil. Hence, the hidden meaning of the great truth of old: as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, and as a man sows, so shall he also reap. The Demonistic Theory. The insane frequently have delusions that devils torment them, and they see visual hallucinations or visions of these servants of the underworld and hear their voices. This is another terrible truth, which the scriptures make quite clear, but with the superficial scientists pooh-pooh and say humbug. I sometimes wonder what madness really is. When I hypnotize a normal person into a trance state, and then find that he can be made to see exactly the same visions, hear the same voices, and believe in the same evil forces, if so commanded. Surely this again is a question of mastery over the individual vibrations which emanate from the particular individual. If I can produce these alterations in vibrations in the normal to make them abnormal, why cannot I persist in my endeavors to make the abnormal normal by a reversal of the process? If devils, as it were, can get in by suggestion, surely they can be turned out of the innermost consciousness of the mind of man by suggestion also. For what can be suggested there can be suggested away. It would, after all, almost appear as if we were living in a material world in which all the invisible powers are let loose and in full force. Just as the wireless transmission is in complete activity. Yet, without a wireless control set, these waves of ether cannot be converted into sound waves of music and the like. And at will, we can also as easily cut off the wireless pickup and so cease to hear the wireless, although the vibrations are still there. Perhaps, after all, it is our mental deficiency that is at fault, and not those of the so-called insane, who often are in full possession of many of their faculties. They have in many cases insight, and because they produce phenomena which to us are grotesque, we, in our feebleness, cry aloud, "Put this man away, for he is mad." Some years ago, when I bought one of the first wireless sets and allowed a certified person of unsound mind to listen in, I was intrigued with his remark. "But do you mean to tell me, sir, that you cannot hear music in the air without a toy instrument like that? I have heard this music at will for the past 15 years. May I suggest that this remark of one alleged to be insane should be seriously considered and not ignored as the rambling of one who has lost his reason. How many have said unkindly that Sir Oliver Lodge is doting in his old age because he studied spiritualistic phenomena? Although I am not a spiritualist, I must strongly defend this great man of science, who is many years ahead of his time. He will be shown in days that are to come to have fathomed and mastered truths which will never die and be only really appreciated then. Around us and about us are the everlasting arms, spirits good and evil. And telepathy is merely our present-day way of trying, in our ignorance, to explain the phenomena of wonders yet untold. I do not have visions, but because I cannot see visions, cannot hear imaginary voices, and because I cannot feel unseen influence as such, it would be utter pig-headedness on my part to take the attitude that because I was not capable of understanding such marvelous phenomena, such therefore could not exist. Let us remember that there are more things in heaven, in hell, and on earth than ever we have dreamt of. A study of the unconscious mind from what I regard as the kingdom of heaven point of view should clearly show the most primitive thinker how heaven or hell can become a great reality and an everlasting state of mind in the life after death. Telepathy, a reality. To have your thoughts read is no more illusion or delusion. When an insane person tells you that his thoughts are being read, you say impossible. Who is right? Don't forget the Scotland Yard demonstration. Don't therefore answer too quickly, but read on. The hypnotized subject tells the name of a town the thinker is thinking of. All that is required is for the person to concentrate his thoughts on the name of the town, which the subject by mental telepathy will read at once. If the subject fails, it has been proved that it is entirely for the want of complete concentration on the part of the person's mind on the name of the town, and not the fault of the subject. Don't forget that mind telepathy was the first telegraph and telephone service in the world. It might reasonably be considered only a matter of degree between the experiments which I carry out on normal people and the delusions of the insane. Who knows? The sage now stretched out his legs, drank some lemonade, and suggested that we must sift out the knowledge which is shallow from that which is deep. Knowledge which is shallow and that which is deep. In a voice composed, dignified, and soothing, he embarked on his great philosophy. It is well to read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest these truths, of which we have just spoken. We must persevere in our efforts, bearing in mind that perseverance is the world's greatest ruler and is the price of success. Mushrooms spring up in a night and wither soon afterwards. So it is with shallow knowledge. The tree takes years and maybe centuries to grow, but its roots are deep and its branches are great. So be it with much knowledge. Cultivate the tree of knowledge of these precious fruits, telepathy, and clairvoyance. Now that you are aware that you have the root, prune, water, and be careful not to let it wither in solitude. How power and knowledge grow. This subtle power comes through seeing the best in others, in heart and mind. The very way the magnetic man or woman shakes hands with another instantly sends a stimulus of encouragement through the nerve centers of the brain and body, and the harmony of that vibration is in accord with happiness, confidence, and health. Why is one actor greater than another? One has the power to feel what he says and does. The other merely parrots his words. Wishing and purpose. Wishing is not attainment unless you add to it purpose. Willing is the act of concentration. It is to be concentrated holding together of the whole conscious faculties of the mind and determining a result to be achieved. To know mind is to know God. Therefore respect all, but fear no man. Mind is greater than matter. Fear is the proof of a degenerate mind. Impossible is the adjective of fools. Note that the human conscious mind can only think of one subject at one time. The unconscious mind can think of many things. The Master of Destiny. The conscious mind may falter, but the unconscious mind never falters. Perhaps it knows all things. The conscious mind is but the outside wall to the palace of the unconscious with its treasures of memory, music, language, love, and life, its very self. The key of wisdom is in your hands. It alone can open the gate to this palace of the inner man and the hereafter along the path into the strange paragon of truth and power. Telepathy will grasp the mental difficulties of others and adjust them by a look. With a word they will understand, as if by magic. Telepathic repetition of a suggestion becomes a fixed idea in the mind, and the waking and sleeping thoughts repeat it to the one influenced automatically and unconsciously, until at last he becomes his thoughts, and his thoughts become him. As a man thinketh in his heart unconsciously, so is he. Let us confess that the real origin even of the simplest of things we know not. Does anyone think that the skill of the beaver, the instinct of the bee, or the genius of man arose by chance? That their presence is accounted for by transmission and by survival? We must know life as well as books. The bones and sinews do not make a man, but just a corpse. Except for the mind, the body would be only a piece of mechanism. There is no purpose without mind, and there is no effect without cause, either in the creation of the universe or in man. No man or woman can afford to be without the consciousness of power, and no great man or woman is without such. The unconscious mind is indeed the soul of man. This mighty power has conquered the destiny of man, making the word greater than the sword. Thousands fail where few win, for the only reason that they will not begin at the rudiments which lie at the bottom of all knowledge. Wisdom is only really understood when the mind is large enough to acknowledge that we know nothing. For the genius of man is only manifested in accordance with his tastes and requirements from before the Stone Age to this very day. The minds of materialists are a facsimile of the partially blind. Ignorance is the want of real knowledge. Stupidity is inability to acquire knowledge. Obstinacy is miserable conceit. Both the materialist and the ignorant cannot conceive any unseen reality that actually exists, which makes no impression on their physical senses. Making the blind from birth see. The materialist will say that this is impossible, yet Jesus Christ made the blind from birth see. And we are told that what he did we can also do, if only we have faith in ourselves to be able to do it. There was a man who had been born blind, and through medical skill, at a late age, was given sight for the first time in his life. And he gazed upon a new world. The first thing which he saw was something that he could not understand, but it was the physician hypnotist, or hypnologist's face. When he had passed his fingers several times over this face, he at last exclaimed excitedly, "Oh, it must be a face, a face, a face!" He only learned this through his sense impressions, which in his case was the sense of touch, as he could not as yet interpret the sense of sight now given to him. He had to learn how to use this gift. The great lesson which the once blind teach us. When we grasp the great truth that a human being has not been outside the field of his five senses of seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, and tasting, which is his normal consciousness, that he has in reality only beholden the reflection of things upon what we call the earth onto the mirror of the mind or retina inside the eye, that his nerves are as feelers which convey sense impressions which become ideas, construed into thought by certain faculties of the mind, which these are summed up rightly or wrongly and called this, that, and the other, and by deduction, by concepts of the faculty of reason, realized and determined as facts, as far as the mind, through these sense impressions, can determine anything as a fact. We then come to the wall which separates the known from the hitherto unknown. It is to a great extent, even to the scientist of the most advanced ability, only speculation when he dares to say that he has arrived on the other side of the wall and can account for all life and that which appertains to it. Matter has no power to reach the thoughts of the mind unless matter is mind also. The greatest men of science today are men who rely on imagination, and the more they prove the finite, the more are they forced into wonder at the marvels of the infinite. The lesson of the eye. Do you know that the human eye was formed with a full knowledge of light, and is the most perfect optical instrument extant, created to receive light, although it was made in great darkness? What a parable of life this is! Do you remember Mr. Norman Mills, who impersonated John Bull and was a well-known music hall artist? He had definite Roman numbers on the edges of the iris so that his wife told him he had clock eyes. These extraordinary facts are pregnant with meaning, and in one sense may account for the extraordinary countenance and features of both the Chinese and Japanese races, whose womenfolk habitually worship their angular, slit-eyed idols. The effect of beholding such may naturally and scientifically produce in their offspring a resemblance of what has made so deep a telepathic impression on the mind through the medium of the eye. The story of Jacob, the great psychologist of old. And this reminds me of the old story of Jacob who got the better of his father-in-law. Jacob was clever and understood in a measure the power of suggestion, even to the creative mind in cattle. For do we not read in the book of Genesis chapter 30, "And Jacob took him rods of green poplar, and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and peeled white strakes in them, and made the white strakes appear, which was in the rods, and he set the rods which he peeled before the flocks in the gutters and in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted." All mind is a part of the greater mind, the universal mind whose essence is God, and even the animal world, the lower creation, are a part of such, and may eventually be absorbed at death in the greater. But as there appears no consciousness of the existence of self manifested by reflection in the animal's mind, one must conclude that no further conscious existence will be given to such. The opposite of man with his faculty of reason, reflection in memory and conscious experience, which make him an individuality, and a responsible one, has been debarred to the animal world. As nothing even in matter is ever really lost, but only undergoes a change chemically, it is not unreasonable to suppose that mind is not totally destroyed, even in the animal, at the death of its body. Wisdom in things invisible, which vibrate in life, the objective mind and the subjective mind. If we do not understand the invisible things which appear to our objective mind, or the invisible which vibrate on our subjective mind, and refuse to learn from nature the great lessons of life, light and love, how is it that we expect to know anything of the higher spheres of human ethics or the immortal psyche? To understand a picture, one must be sure of the central figure. To mistake the central figure is to mistake the picture itself. The doctrine that life alone can produce life is victorious along the whole line of the present day. It is well to recall the fact that all the sciences being related, there can be no complete knowledge of any science without the thorough knowledge of them all. The world's greatest need. At this very hour, the world is seething with unrest in its search for not a specialist in this, that, or the other, but a specialist in mankind as such, who views man as combined of spirit, soul, and body, and recognizes that the interaction of the three is so close that they can never touch one without touching all three. The mystery of disease. Cancer is sometimes cured spontaneously. Why? Surgeons must admit, and do admit it. How does the invisible process of cure come about? Sir Clifford Albert of Cambridge and Leeds said, "Probably no limb or viscus is so far a vessel of dishonor as to lie wholly outside the renewals of the spirit." The dawn of another day was almost upon us as we arose that early morning, having gained much in knowledge, truth, and light. As the Governor General passed my gates to the click of the bayonets, the sunrise on the Monday morn was upon us, indicative of a new day, a new birth of reality, and a new power from on high. End of chapter. Well, if you haven't done so yet, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and head over to the next video where we will learn the science of hypnotism and telepathy.